All right. All right. Welcome, everybody. Y'all know me. I'm Greg Bloom, and I'm excited. It's been a couple months since we took the time to gather together and chat. Right now, this call has a bunch of folks from DC, so I'm looking forward to talking about what's going on in DC. We're expecting a few other folks to join us, but we're not going to wait. We're just going to get started. So here's what I'm thinking. I have a couple of topics that are just sort of general that we can discuss. But generally, the format, we go around. People talk about what it is that they're working on, share a little bit of an update, and share any questions that you might have. And usually just like going around and sharing updates takes up a significant amount of time and people talk to each other. But then we'll try to save some time at the end to talk about a few topics such as specifically I'm thinking I'm applying for this Knight Foundation news challenge. We'll take some time to talk about that. And also I've received some helpful suggestions, I think, for developing new communication channels for the initiative, and so we'll take some time to talk about that as well. But let's go ahead and let's share some updates. I'll sort of share updates last because I expect we'll have a couple more people join us. So tell us who you are, what you're working on, how it's relevant to community resource data, and questions you might have about your work, about the initiative overall, and share any other agenda items that you might want us to talk about now or address in the future. I can just go down the line. Susie, how you doing over there? You need another minute?
Do I look stupid right now?
No, well, it looks like there's all kinds of momentum over on your camera.
Yeah,
okay.
Sorry. So, well, I am stupid right now. Lack of sleep. So I'm a consultant in the deputy mayor's office, and the update.
Deputy mayor's office of.
Oh, sorry, for Health and Human Services.
In DC.
DC. The update is, I think, a couple people know. Oh, my phone's dying. Is that all I've been doing is working on updating the data. Shit, the phone. Sorry, let me do that. Sorry.
Well, while Susie's working on that, Susie's working with the Department of Human Services.
Hi. I don't know where
a 211 improvement program. Right now, they're focusing on publishing data on all government services in the District of Columbia, and they are their software vendor is iCarol, who's they were not able to join us for this call today, but they're very active in the Open Referral Initiative. Susie, did we lose you? All right.
I think so.
All right. Seems like we might have lost Susie. She was also the note taker. So Barrett, I'm gonna volunteer you to take notes if you can jump in the document and help us out. Is that all right? But I'll take notes on you. You go ahead and introduce yourself, Barrett.
All right. I'm Barrett Pittner. I was working with the initiative in DC. I'm a journalist, and so right now Greg and I are kind of like brainstorming and kind of got some blog posts and stories that we can do to kind of give a good profile of what's going on and how everything's working. Like in DC or around the country, we did a blog post about Bread for the City earlier, like about a month ago, and now we're working on a more long form kind of article that could be, put it out on Medium or HuffPo or something like that. So that's about it.
Could you tell us a little bit about the story that you worked on with Bread?
Yeah, so the Bread story, it was talking about how they used, after they did a bunch of work internally, they've realized that there are certain structures that they had that were inefficient for giving people access to services, where people would have to come to Bread for the City and get a referral that then they could then go and get clothing or other needs, and they determined that that was really inefficient, and they went about bringing together like a group of people and nonprofits to not have this referral structure in place, because it just kind of was inconvenient and expensive and just kind of not beneficial for the people that need it the most. Additionally, one thing they've noticed is a lot of these structures kind of disproportionately impact people of color detrimentally, and so part of their refocusing and restructuring how they provide services is to have an emphasis towards racial equity, and that was also a big component of the piece, because it's like sometimes these structures, whether the intent is to harm one group of people more than the other or not, sometimes it just kind of like plays out like that, and you kind of have to look at how you go about doing things to make sure that they're as fair and equitable as possible. And so that was what the piece for Bread for the City was about.
Cool. Do you have questions for us? Questions for the initiative, whether for your story or based on what you saw at Bread? Anything to add to the agenda?
Right now, I think the best thing is kind of see what everyone's working on and add to it. We kind of have a pretty good. Right now I have a good understanding of what went on before, so now seeing what people are doing now would be helpful, and then I'll probably ask some questions after I get some more information.
Okay. If people haven't seen the story that Barrett did, and we also reblogged it on the Open Referral blog, I think it's a really great example of just like an initial instance of an organization using resource directory data for things other than referrals, for actually like systems analysis and advocacy for change. I think Bread has only just gotten started with structuring their information so that they can track these things, and they have a lot of room yet to improve. But even just over the last 6 months, they've been able to change the way that food pantries in the district do their business, because they were able to show how the details of like requiring a referral slip and prolonging this intake process, they were able to show how that negatively impacted their clients and advocate for systemic change. So I think it's a really great, laudable example, and you should check it out. All right, so we lost Susie. If she comes back, we'll hear more about the DC government's work. Keith, since we're talking about DC, go ahead and give us an update on what's going on.
Sure. So my name is Keith Bocaro. I work at SimLab. We're a nonprofit in DC, and we've got offices in a few other places in New York and London and Nairobi. We just wrapped up about a month ago a prototype project with the DC Public Library. So we spent time with them exploring how they might be able to use tools to help their clients find better information about social services. And so we developed a small kind of prototype that we'll be kind of talking more about soon, that sort of helps librarians guide clients through short interviews, and then based on the answers to those interview questions can generate a custom packet of information, and that packet can draw on either information that the library has locally or from databases once they're ready in DC. So at the moment, what we are sort of in the midst of doing is, the period with the library is over, and we're sort of going around with the tool and talking to some folks in DC and trying to gather interest in that, and sort of seeing where that might go. And I think at the same time we're working on a few very early stages of initiatives to help people get sort of feedback on service referrals in order to make sure that when somebody is sent out or somebody is recommended to go to another provider, that they actually do so and they can get help, which is something that's more or less missing in the city.
let me see if I can repeat this back to you and see if I get it right, just for the benefit of others who maybe aren't as familiar with the project. You've essentially prototyped a tool that enables the library to develop like scenario-based logic, so that they can have a series of questions that they ask of patrons that identify information that generates results, including locally maintained information and also service directory results from at least some sort of compatible database maybe in the future, that provides some level of sort of like of reference material for library patrons. And the idea is that this would be a open source tool that could be used with various other kinds of software. Is that basically get that right?
Yeah, more or less. It's a way for people to build tools that use logic without servers.
Cool. Do you have questions for us, Keith?
I think I would be, just sort of curious to learn a little bit more, hear a little bit more about, some of the, progress that the initiative is taking, especially with platform providers. So what we found in DC is that, and I think this echoes what Ivy said the last time I was at one of these, which is that there is a lack of information organization in a lot of places that really sort of it really sort of stops a lot of these efforts from being as good as they could be, because they do tend to require ongoing maintenance and a lot of work up front. So I'm starting to sort of think, and some labs sort of angle at this problem as sort of as an ongoing systemic issue that needs to continue to have resources devoted to it before initiatives like this and like what we've worked on are really going to be successful.
Yeah. On that note, Susie, welcome back.
Hello.
Susie, tell us a little bit about the DC government's 2-on-1 improvement project and what you're doing.
We are focusing on right now the data for the Aging and Disability Resource Center, which means cleaning it all up, making sure that we collect information for the data elements that providers have said that they want, right? So we've added more about referral process and that sort of thing. And along the way, finding all sorts of things that we have to fix, and so trying to fix those and raise questions mostly about, like, do we include this? Do we not include that? I'm trying to figure out what the future of 2-1, help the deputy mayor figure out what the future of 2-on-1 looks like, and so I've been bugging Clive a lot at AIRS about position descriptions and stuff like that, just to make sure that we have the kind of staffing, not that we need, but closer to what we need to do the kind of data entry required to have a good system.
Okay. Cool.
That's it.
Great.
And then working with various folks. So we've got a couple agencies. Help Me Grow is back on the table in the Department of Health, and so they are they want to use 2-on-1 as the underlying database for their work. So I've been working with them and a couple other organizations, DC government agency, helping them think about what their data should look like. Mm-hmm. And let me just say, it's really sad and kind of scary that I know more than they do about this.
Well, you've been doing this 20 years, right?
Yeah, but I mean, understanding sort of this whole requiring a taxonomy and all of that kind of stuff.
Uh-huh. Okay.
That's where we are.
All right. By the way, my Hangouts seem to be interfering with my Google Doc, so I'm currently not able to take notes. So Barrett, I hope you're in there. All right, so we've heard from DC. Oh wait, Susie, do you have questions for us on the call or for the initiative in general that we could help you answer internally for your own work or for people in your department?
Not right now. I mean, it really is sort of, at 3 o'clock in the morning I have a question, and then I email someone and get an answer, and then it's sort of this iterative, I don't have a list of things today.
Okay. All right. Okay, great.
But, learn a lot as I go along from everybody, so I'm looking, so you guys have to, say something profound that I can implement.
Okay. All right, let's see if anything profound comes out of this call.
Of course it will.
So let's hear from Canada.
Okay, I guess that's me.
Yeah, go for it.
Hi, sorry I have no video. I have no camera on this computer, but you'll forgive me. So, yeah, I'm up in Canada working as a software developer for a nonprofit called CIOC, Community Information Online Consortium. I've been working on their software since 2002, so about 13 years now, and they're about to do a great big pivot and bringing all of their software products open source. So they do human resources database, client tracking database, offline resource database for disaster services, volunteer opportunity matching system. It's a huge big suite of products, and we're taking both the software and all of the different little classifications that we've developed to support people over the years, like how to classify volunteer opportunities, ways to describe accessibility, lists of languages, lists of even down to contact types, all that stuff's all going open. So we started with that process in the spring, open sourcing our geographic taxonomy for Canada, including the software that drives the taxonomy management system, and have now released all of the supplementary data, so the volunteer position descriptions and all these other things. And we're just going to keep going, expecting to be done by the end of 2015. We'll probably have released somewhere on the order of a good 800,000 lines of software code by then. That's what happens when you develop something for 13 years. So yeah, I think it brings us really in line with the Open Referral Project, both because we're trying to become an open system and with our software, with all of that, but also because we've been doing data sharing, both internally with users of our application and also with a number of other systems for more than 10 years. So we have a lot of lessons learned, I think, to bring to the table about how to do data sharing effectively, what a lot of the pitfalls are, what the real world expectations are from people when you take data from two different systems, and particularly where they have slightly different requirements on that data, and how you cope with add-ons like I need this classification, you need that classification, I need this field, you need that field, and also figuring out how to pick an owner and how to manage sort of when you have multiple people maintaining the record, how do you get that down to one core record? This is all stuff we've now been dealing with for a really long time, and I think that we potentially have a lot to bring to the table because of that. So that's me.
Great. And I'll also be joining Kate for a presentation to her network next week, where I'll be presenting a little bit about the Open Referral Initiative. I'm looking forward to that. Kate, do you have questions for us, for anyone on the call or for the initiative overall?
I don't think so. I think this is my first step in, so I'm happy to kind of hear what's going on and be here if needed.
Great. Thanks. Michael Lenzner. Mike.
Yeah, sorry, just getting off of mute.
All right, there you go.
Hi, Greg.
Hi.
Yeah, so I'll introduce myself. There's not too much of an update on our work, but I'm from Montreal, so another Canadian. And I have a company called Aja that takes mostly open and some public data about the nonprofit sector, and then commercializes it by selling it as a fundraising service, similar to the Foundation Center in the U.S. And we're also looking at other types of data and how we can create value with that, both in a commercial sense and just a resource for the nonprofit sector. We have a social arm called Powered by Data that aims to increase the amount of open data in the nonprofit sector that's used in the nonprofit sector. So I'm basically really interested in, well, I think this is an important solution, but I'm interested also in being part of this community because we're advising people about open data. So in Ontario, we're helping the Association of Nonprofits develop an open data plan, or a data plan for the province, which will have open data and 2-on-1 hopefully as a part of it. And we're also advising funders on how they can publish open data. So I'm not sure if there's any opportunities for funders to publish 2-on-1 data. I know for some of the government agencies that we're talking with, like Citizenship and Immigration, they do collect referral data, not referral data, like information organizations. So anyways, we'll continue to push that to those people that do have that data. And we have to come up with some pilot projects in Ontario to show the benefit of having a data strategy, probably in a subsector. So I'm still looking for ideas of how we can take advantage of open referral data in spaces. So if we have, budget we're talking about is maybe $100,000 to kind of not show a finished project that has benefits, but really show very clearly what the benefits would be if we were to make some changes. So I'm looking for more concrete examples of kind of not wins, but actually how can you save people time and increase access to certain information that will result in real world differences.
Yeah.
So yeah, so anyways, happy to see resources on the list and have people share stuff.
Mike, do you have any questions for us?
Really, I think if anyone has anything to share, I just hope people share stuff with you, Greg, and that you'd redistribute it, because avidly looking for examples of projects. There's a great example I just read recently of funders releasing all the project materials of projects they funded. So actually releasing the full application and details about those resources about those projects. So if people have other just examples of things where information is open in the nonprofit sector to benefit, happy to see those.
Yeah.
I would love to get those.
Well, I know Kate, you and Mike have been at least on a phone call before.
Yeah.
And, Kate and or her people in her network might have some good ideas for you, Mike.
Yeah, I think we'll have to talk. Kate's you're not in Toronto, are you?
I'm in Burlington. I might as well be in Toronto.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
so,
I am. And actually, the session that we're running on Tuesday that Greg is attending, we've got so far about 36 people registered from at least 4 different provinces, and I think it shows a serious interest from them in participating, and so I think that might open some doors. I'll be really interested to see what the actual response is.
Yeah, so I hope you and Greg can let me know if there's people in Ontario that are interested in releasing their data more, and hopefully we can include them in a project.
Cool. Yep.
Thanks.
All right. Margarita joined us, although I know she's been having some trouble with Wi-Fi. Margarita, can you hear us? Can you speak?
Yeah, I can hear you well. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm on cell, not on Wi-Fi, so I apologize. I am Margarita Soto, and I'm co-founder of Apogee. We're a startup that's taking open data, mostly New York City, creating directory and resource tools for social service providers, and we're pre-launch. So we've been in design and development and are very excited at open data. We think that more and more there's going to be more players in this space, and we think that really everybody can add more value, the nonprofit sector as well as the for-profit sector, if the open data that's available is a cleaner set of data. So very excited to be present here today and to learn more about what you guys are working on.
Cool. Do you have questions for us to shape the agenda?
Not right now. I'm going to listen in and try to hear. I just want to make sure I'm clear on who's on the call right now. I think I have Michael and Kate. Is April also on? I just missed some of the intro, so I apologize.
Yeah, we have Michael Lenzner and Kate Lambecker.
Uh-huh.
And is that how I say your name, Kate?
Sorry, I was muted. Yes, that's
Okay,
right.
great.
Well, actually, I think it's Lambacher or something German. I don't know. It's not my maiden name. So
I'm going to stick with Lambecker.
I go with Lambacher. That's
Okay.
right.
Mike and Kate are from Mike's in Quebec and Montreal, and Kate's outside of Toronto. We have Barrett Pittner and Keith Porcaro and Susie Cambria from DC, representing a sort of a real diverse set of perspectives. Barrett's been working with Bread for the City, social service provider. Keith's been developing tools with the DC Public Library, and Susie's working with the DC government, trying to get data up to speed and ready to go out the door from their iCarol 211 system.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Cool. Yeah, I'm not sure what happened with the San Francisco crew, but I'm happy to share some updates about with them, just based on what little I know. I can give you all a little bit of an update on how I've been spending my time over the last couple months, and some questions that I've been grappling with. And there's one issue in particular that I'd love to get some feedback on. So from a high level, I've been working somewhat increasingly, less full-time on this, as I've been finding a couple other ways to keep the ships afloat. But the time that I have been spending, in addition to engaging with stakeholders such as yourselves, I've been finding opportunities to pursue funding to rebuild development capacity, both within specific stakeholding institutions and for the Open Referral Initiative at large. So one important potential source of funding that I mentioned on the list, and maybe we'll get a chance to talk about, is the Night News Challenge, which this year is very relevant to our work. Night funded the Ohana team in the past, which was one of our partnerships that sort of kicked us off, but we haven't been directly funded. They actually did fund Keith's work with the DC Public Library, and both of those projects ended up, with a report in tonight saying, you should continue to fund this sort of systems level engagement and development. So I'm hoping that this new news challenge is a good opportunity. And I'm actually going to share in the chat column over here the draft of the application, which is a pretty bare bones application. If we advance past this round, it gets a little more complex, but we can take some time to talk about some of the nuance in here. So you can see that in the chat box. I've also been working with Bread for the City to apply for some funding from the Salesforce Foundation and some other local DC institutions. I spent a few weeks out in San Francisco working with a number of local community groups and also talking with the United Ways out there. The San Francisco 211 has actually been under a major leadership transition, and so our pilot has ended up being there a lot more focused on individual organizations' own internal resource directories, a number of Microsoft Word documents that people are transforming into structured databases, and then exploring how to enable collaboration across local San Francisco groups. And there's a fellowship called the Shuttleworth Foundation that I'm going to be applying for personally. I have some high hopes for that. It would make a huge difference. And there's a couple of other funders that I've been talking to, sort of articulating the need to go from what we've essentially got, which is agreement in principle on a data spec, which is no small achievement, and a number of early adopters, including Purple Binder, who wasn't able to make the call, and including iCarol, which is they also weren't able to make the call, but they're in DC and San Francisco, and they have at least a third of the 211 market and almost a half of the entire calling center service market. We have those two implementers, but it's clear that we actually need a lot more support to be able to do the kind of engagement that brought us to this point, and actually take it into the point where systems are running and value is being delivered. So in the meantime, this initiative is very much driven by the sparks from people on the ground, such as yourselves and institutions that have the resources and the initiative to be able to take what we've done so far and take small steps forward towards newer open systems. And so let's see, are there other funders? I have been working with folks in Miami. The primary funder in Miami is going to be has suggested their willingness to support like a sort of initial pilot project with the 211 there. And also we're recently working with Montgomery County Department of Human Services, which is very exciting for the DC project because they actually have done a really good job in Montgomery County of maintaining a website with comprehensive information about services, and it looks like they're likely to shift into a compatible platform that would not just have the website, but also have a raw feed of the data available in the same format that DC is moving to, and other iCarol customers around the region will be moving to. So lots of momentum in small places, but we're definitely, to be candid, we're definitely waiting for that next institutional sponsorship that's going to help us kick it into high gear. So I have a couple of other thoughts, but I want to pause to take questions and also sort of talk through the framing of this Knight Foundation grant, because it's definitely being submitted on behalf of the Open Referral Initiative, whereas some of the other funding streams that I'm applying for or helping organizations apply for, it's much more about specific organizational projects and not so much necessarily about the Open Referral Initiative as a whole. So let me know if you have questions, and then I can talk a little bit about the framing of this Knight Foundation grant. Anyone? You can also type questions into the little chat box. Okay, cool. So the Knight Foundation grant, basically, right now it's pretty basic. There's nothing in here that's super surprising. One of the questions that I have to figure out basically over the next couple of days is how we are framing what would actually be funded. As you know, Open Referral is not an organization at this point, and I sort of see three ways that we could frame this. One is just generally like fund this initiative at a high level without being very specific about what, other than just like the advancement of this cause, the funding will cover. Another option is to specify a particular pilot project that the funding would power. And actually, folks here in New York City, I'm in New York at the moment, and we've been invited actually to host a pilot project at Civic Hall, which is really exciting. It's a great new civic technology community space, and the Knight Foundation knows them. I'm a little wary of starting a new pilot project when we have pilots in DC and San Francisco and elsewhere that are still just getting their feet under them. So then a third option for the framing of this Knight grant would be, if we get this funding, we will select a pilot project to focus in on. So those are three different ways to frame it. I'm not sure how, I don't particularly want to overthink this. Not sure how much it matters, but I am really open to feedback from folks about what you think would be effective.
Well, I just wanted to pop in there and to let you know, I think that they would be very excited about your project. Last year, we actually applied. This is Margarita, by the way. We applied for the Knight Foundation grant. I thought it was also for social enterprise, not just nonprofits. And we did talk a lot about kind of the data needs, and we did get through round one without really much difficulty at all. And I didn't submit my information for round two because at that point they did indicate they wanted it to be a nonprofit. Yeah. So I think that either way you approach it, I think they're going to be somewhat interested.
Cool. Yeah. And again, the link to the document, if anybody wants to take a look, it has a bunch of suggestions that various folks have put in. Like I said, a lot of this is really finicky wordsmithing, and I'm not all that concerned about the precise wording of things. It is definitely a mouthful get this whole initiative into one sentence. So I continue to struggle for the best sentence, the best possible sentence. We have a few versions here, but I think that the most important thing that I wanted to bring up was, the openness to thinking about the right way to frame what this funding would actually do. Is it just funding the initiative, like as in myself and the work of a developer and and some other support at a high level, or should it be funding one particular pilot project that we designate up front, or whether we should actually say, this funding would be awarded to the support of a particular pilot project should we get it. So there's just different ways to slice that, and I'm very open to feedback. And if anybody wants to get more active in the crafting of this, by all means, let me know.
Greg?
Yeah.
So I guess I'd just say I imagine this is mostly run by the Data and Society people in New York, right? So they have a special collaboration.
Yeah.
So I imagine that it'd be a new crowd that'd be very interested. So I would kind of start again with the whole explanation.
Yep.
And I just imagine they're going to make all the decisions, not the Knight Foundations, right?
That may be. That may be.
Dana Boyd, I think, not her, but her group will probably make all the decisions with this. Yeah. Otherwise, why do a partnership? Yeah. And then secondly, I think something with the civic tech group would be great because they are a new group, and I wouldn't have a problem with doing another pilot project. I don't think that would be an issue. Yeah. The only thing about funding a network is like, what is the big, like, there's very small amounts of money and they're hoping to have outsized impact. Yeah. So like, what is the big impact that you're going to have by funding a network? Anyway, I'm sure other people on the list have lots of experience with grants and fundraising, and I just wanted to share that.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you. That's helpful. I will also. There's something else that I'm going to share with y'all here. I've been starting to share it with some folks. It's still very, very early on. I'm sort of testing out a new way to frame what it is that needs to get done. And the original frame, the one that I still stand by, was essentially approaching this as a community organizing challenge, in which we would get a number of different kinds of stakeholders in a room and facilitate relationship building and learning among those stakeholders, and see what solutions emerge from those conversations, and then help them implement those solutions, and then sort of promote them in other communities. I still think that is important work that should be done. It's not super easy for funders to understand, and also it's susceptible to all kinds of challenges as we experience in San Francisco and DC, where organizations who are our stakeholders in this process have staff turnover and capacity limitations, and so the new frame that I'm testing out, based on some feedback from stakeholders, some of whom are here on the call and others elsewhere, is essentially the potential to form, like, Ohana was a team, for example. The Ohana team was a Code for America fellowship. They built a prototype that they scaled out into a redeployable app. And other Code for America fellowships have sort of birthed companies who've gone on to build products and have a sustainable model of implementing those products. Ohana chose not to do that, not to go that path. They sort of finished up their product and moved on. But I still think that there's a need in this space for capacity, essentially, of building infrastructure. And we're essentially advocating for the building of infrastructure through this process. And there might be the opportunity to form a company that could actually go in and do it. The idea, I personally would only be associated with such a thing under the condition that anything that gets built is open source, that the objective of this undertaking is to enable existing systems to work together. And I think we have precedents for that kind of sustainable model, such as WordPress, for example, is open source software. Anybody can use it. There's also a company that manages it, that hosts sites if you want your site to be hosted, and so on. So I just shared with you all a sort of initial outline of this new sort of business-oriented framework. And I'm testing it out. I would love to get your feedback this is the kind of thing that funders say that they're more interested in funding. I think it can be developed in a way that's compatible with what Open Referral has done so far, and that supports the goals and objectives of all of our stakeholders at the table. But it is a pivot. It would be a pivot, and so I'm eager to get folks' feedback, hear concerns, hear suggestions for similar precedents, that sort of thing. I'll pause for questions in case anybody has any. Was all that clear? I'm sure I have to work on my elevator pitch. I'm not even sure I gave a complete version of it here. Any questions? Okay.
Well, I have a question. So or rather a statement. I think having some clarity about the scope of the technology project is important, because at the moment I'm not sure. There isn't enough definition in what you've given for me to understand what the real scope is or who the consumers are specifically. And I would like to see both of those things clearly. Like this is who I would expect would be the consumers in this role. This is the scope of the project in terms of the actions it will be able to take, and we don't expect it to do this, and we do expect to do that. Like I would like to see not a full-fledged specification, but more detail about what you have in mind.
Yeah, that's a helpful point. And actually, now that I'm looking at the document, I realize there are a couple of points about what this would not do that either I had in an earlier version and aren't here, or I haven't brought in for my notes. So to sort of reiterate, the idea would be that this essentially builds infrastructure that serves businesses and governments. That this is essentially information architecture that enables previously siloed systems to become like a federated network, sharing data that's held in a common resource repository. So the objective is not to develop software that meets the needs of end users. It would not be software that does things like actually provide referrals or collect feedback on the quality of the organizations. It would just be holding the records of record. And the company itself, if this were to exist, would not, like, it would be essentially, the business model would be around the implementation, support, training, and maintenance of such a thing. This would be open source technology that anybody could develop. Its primary design principles would be integration with existing systems,
right?
For the purpose of essentially helping solve the data management and supply problem in ways that are complementary and sort of build on the existing referral infrastructure in a community.
Right. So when I talk about sort of scale or scope, how much data do you actually think is going to be in this thing? Just out of curiosity, I've told you about some of the data sets that we work with now. And when I think about scale, I worry about overpromising, or at least that you need to be prepared for what scale is really going to mean.
Yeah.
And make sure that your budget actually is realistic with the scale of your proposal. Yeah. Given the amount of data that you could be thinking about here.
Great. Yeah, this is that's one of the key questions. I mean, I think based on our experience so far, let's say the DC metro area, from our analysis, we're talking about 500 organizations and agencies with about 1,500 services. That's roughly for the District of Columbia. If you take the whole DC metro area, it probably gets a little bit larger. Likewise in New York, I think New York is substantial. Like New York's the biggest. We're here now. I mean, some people suggest that there's 60,000 services in the whole New York metro area. And so while that's not necessarily huge, that's not. I wouldn't necessarily, in any given area, we're not talking about quote unquote big data. Although if you do scale up to the entire country or continent, which is not the objective of this business plan up front, but if it were to be successful, it could essentially become infrastructure that hosts all that. It does get big. I think we have precedents out there such as OpenStreetMaps and other kinds of successful commenting undertakings that do end up scaling to be really substantial. But Kate, as someone who's actually worked with this data at length, your perspective on this sort of thing is invaluable. So, like I said, it's just I wouldn't even call this a first draft. These are just like initial notes as I'm thinking ahead as to, in terms of what's going to happen in 2016. So.
Right. Where our stats show, just as that for a database of about 150,000 agency site service records, we, over I think this is a 4-year period I'm looking at, had 11 million changes, because we keep a history of every change. So when you think about transactions, you can think about how much that can scale, and it's just the sort of thing, I think it's doable, but I want to make sure that you either scope the project in a way that you can handle it, or you say our goal is this bigger scope, and you plan the project for a project of that size.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, in this circumstance, to be clear, the context for this proposal is still within the nature of in specific pilot projects, right? The model would not be all that different from the original Open Referral Initiative, where the idea was we go into a community, we work with stakeholders to solve a problem there. So to sort of find the spot between this initial proposal and what I hear you saying, the objective would still be to do a thing and learn from it, and then think about problems of scale as we go. But this suggestion is really valuable, and we'll continue to I'll continue to sort of share this around and see what kinds of concerns we have to be keeping in mind as we go forward. So I have one other set of suggestions. In the last conversation we had, folks talked about an interest in sort of facilitating additional communication between the different projects, and I've been reluctant to continue having frequent video chats, because these are all really nice, but also it takes time. And I want to only really gather us together when there's things to really discuss. But I also agree that the Google group is not so amazing in terms of the ability to keep people in touch with each other and keep conversation going. One thing that's on my list of things to do that I've been horribly procrastinating on is to migrate our GitHub repository from Code for America's account and into Open Referral's account. I'm partially procrastinating on it because I'm still personally new to GitHub, and I don't want to break anything.
I can help you with that.
Oh, great.
I just did a project transfer from me to a SEOC, my account to a SEOC account this week.
Okay.
So it's easy peasy.
Okay. I do think it will be easy peasy. I think what I'm hoping to do is also to sort of revamp the README and other materials so that the repo does a much better job of explaining what the initiative is and pointing to other kinds of projects like Keith's prototype and like the Help Steps project and various things. So we'll be highlighting things in the GitHub repository that are happening across the network. So that's one of the things on my list. Another thing that has been suggested by the San Francisco team is the formation of an Open Referral Slack team. And I'm a little ambivalent about that. On one hand, it's great that actually the San Francisco team is, I think, unlike a lot of the other projects in that they really are a team of 5 or 10 volunteers who are pretty active week to week, and they love Slack. They talk among themselves. I don't know if Slack is a technology that most of the people in our network are all that familiar with.
I use it.
Oh, okay.
We use it internally.
Yeah, I think it's easier for kind of discussion than GitHub. So.
Yeah, and also it's less of a drag than email in some ways. I'm a little ambivalent just because of the potential fracturing of our community. If we have a lot of the people with experience in referral and information on referral, they're in the Google group, And if we move to Slack, I feel like I have a sense that it's going to be pretty developer heavy, pretty tech heavy, and probably a little light on the actual domain expertise. And I'm just wary of sort of recreating that division, that cultural division in the technology that we use. I don't think that's a great reason not to try to use it. I think it's just a reason to be mindful about how we're trying to bridge between these two different technologies. But I wanted to, before we went ahead and created a new team and invited people in, I just wanted to bring it up and see what people thought. And strike anybody as a good idea or a bad idea, or you don't care. I mean, the thing is, the different brigades, the different volunteer groups, often in like Code for DC or Code for Miami, they have open 2-on-1 or open referral channels where they chat whenever somebody's working on the project. And so I don't even know, would we try to move people out of those channels and into this new team? A little bit, to some extent, it's a little unclear to me, but I think it's worth experimenting. And I'm just curious to hear if folks have any thoughts. So.
Keith here. It seems like a good idea. I mean, we use it internally. Communities here, Code for DC uses it, technically uses it. Going through Google Group is frankly an enormous pain.
Yeah.
And for new people joining, it's I think more difficult to go through the history and figure out what's going on. I think Slack makes it easier, and it's not terribly difficult to get a hang of.
Okay. So I'll loop back to Catherine and the San Francisco team who suggested it originally. Any other thoughts about how we might set this up to succeed? Because I kind of anticipate that, Catherine really wanted to do it. I think, I'm like, oh, well, it would be great if we had enough people use it that could make it a real thing. I kind of wonder whether it'll be used, but don't want to, hold back just for fear that it won't get used. So if anybody has thoughts about how to successfully develop a sort of functioning community space in Slack, because it's something that's also new to me, it would be great to have someone helping out while we tinker with it. So. Cool. So it's approaching the top of the hour. I always like to ask folks how they think we could improve the quality of this time that we take. I don't often get all that many suggestions, but I'm sure that there are ways to improve the format and sort of the content of these check-ins. So any thoughts on what you'd want to talk about in the future, how we might make these video check-ins even more worth our time? Any random musings from anyone?
I got an idea. This is Barrett. I think the introductions, like going through and everyone saying their name, is good, but like since we take the notes and put who each person is, if all of us before we get on, if there's like an open Google Doc, we can say who we are and say any specific questions we have, then we could just like blaze on through that really quickly, and then we could also look at any specific questions, and we kind of know from the get-go what people are interested in, instead of like finding out like as we kind of go along. It just could make the introduction quicker and a bit more efficient.
Yeah.
Yes, that's an excellent point. And I think if we had an agenda beforehand, then I think we could also be more prepared to help contribute to the discussion along.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I usually do send out emails in advance, sort of soliciting folks' suggestions for agendas. Usually, if I hear back, it's sort of one-on-one, and then I send out whatever we get over email. But I think these are helpful points, something to think about in advance to make sure that, first of all, in my next prompt for the next time, whenever we have it, I will make that suggestion that people come having written out an introduction of who they are, what they're working on, and any questions that they have that we could copy into the notes document up top.
Well, we could also just have like a shared Google Doc, like from before it starts, like when we get the emails, like, hey, put your intro here, ask 2 questions, and like we all have it. Like,
okay.
We could have those intro like a day or 2 in advance, just like because we all on our calendar that this is here. So that could just be the idea, instead of might be more efficient for you too, because the It won't be one-on-one emails. It's like boom, Google Doc. Everyone's got it. So.
Yeah, for other groups I've had, we do have a Google Doc where everybody has their LinkedIn, their Twitter feed, their, all their different specs, as well as like a, 1 or 2 sentence bio.
Cool. All right, y'all. Any other final thoughts, questions, comments to close this out? Cool. So I'm personally, I'm in New York City for the next 2-3 weeks. Then I'm going to be in London. I'll be back in DC by the end of October for a week or 2. So I'll see you DC folks there then. And Canada folks, I want to find my next time to come up and visit in person. So let's try to put a dot on the calendar. All right.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Great.
Okay, talk later.
Bye, y'all.
Bye.
Bye.